Welcome back to Middle Fingers Up. I'm your host, Kiran. I'm just going to need a second here because this one I've been waiting for a while. So today's episode is, it's not only one that I'm like super excited about, because of course I am. I always say I'm super excited to talk to all the guests that come on. But this one is one of those that I think I've unknowingly been preparing for over the past 6 months, particularly since myself, I have been stepping away from certain spaces and relationships. And in this past 6 months, I've been sitting with what it means to lose community, to rebuild, to recognize sort of where I belong. And then really like in the last 6 months, this deep work that I've been doing is sort of where's my responsibility in all of this, between the communities I've let go, I've lost, and sort of how that's gone down. It's been hard, but it's also made space for me to ask deeper questions about safety, about validation, and then, like what true community is actually supposed to look like. So today's guest, I love this person. I came across her work on socials. Her name is Nike Aurea. She, if you get a chance, please follow her, because I just think there's something about some people's content that helps you understand how clear and how grounded they are. And that's exactly what I found from the work that Nike puts out. I've been learning so much about what it really means to build community, but then not just that, to show up, especially when the community's not looking so pretty. And that's something that I struggle with. And so how do you stick it through? How do you stay there? How do you work through and, come out even stronger? So let me tell you a little bit about this wonderful human. Nike holds a Master's of Education. She works as a community consultant. She's a speaker, and she's also a host of the Catalyst podcast. She works at the intersections of education, care, and strategy, and she's not afraid to disrupt what most of us think or call belonging. Something that has really stood out to me about Nike is that she reminds us that community isn't just about what's a space doing for me, but how am I serving and building? So it's not, can I trust this space? But it's also, can this space trust me? And that disruption isn't just about challenging big systems. While that's really important and impactful, I think where we all get challenged is not just challenging the systems, but also making shifts in our personal lives and the systems that we every day sort of work through in our homes and in the spaces we live in. So today we're going to talk about her journey as a first-gen daughter of immigrants, her philosophy of care and responsibility, and why community asks more of us than convenience. So super excited. Let's get into it. Welcome, Nike. How are you today?
Thank you so much for having me.
So let's go back and get to know you, get to know little Nike, what life was like for her growing up. So I know in our consult, you shared before that your parents were very intentional in passing down your history, their history. So let's talk about what it was like growing up in that environment and how did that shape how you see community today?
Yeah, I love this question. So I was born and raised in the US, but my parents are West African, and I always would go back to West Africa in the summer and also outside of the US to visit like family members. So I always still felt connected to the culture and where my parents grew up and the history as well. And so I'm sure I haven't had the same experience as if I was like born and raised there, but I do find that sometimes folks who are like, they are first gen in Western spaces, like sometimes if they don't go back, they feel a little disconnected. So that was something that was unique about my upbringing. Like I feel like my parents were very intentional about that. And then, yeah, growing up in the US, I grew up in Atlanta, which I also feel like was really impactful on to who I am today, especially it being like a civil rights hub. It was always discussed, talked about, not only at home, but at school as well. And yeah, as someone who's in education on the West Coast, you'll be surprised that, like, well, maybe not as surprised, but each state has their own curriculum when it even comes to that. So, like, on the West Coast, they don't really talk about Martin Luther King Jr. as much as they do, like, specifically in Atlanta, which I guess makes sense, like, regionally. But I do recognize that that really did impact how I see myself as a Black person, and being inspired to advocate for myself and others versus if I had grown up somewhere else. So yeah, my parents, I would say, were very intentional, but not necessarily in the sense of like they were telling us as it happens, like we're telling you this, so you do this, right? It was more so like by showing and guiding, then I kind of inherited what they wanted to teach me. My dad was really intentional in terms of like my sister and I's names. We're the only ones with like African traditional tribal names out of all our cousins. Maybe they have it for like their middle names, but my dad intentionally named us African names, I think, so that we would, have that part of ourselves, even being in the US. And honestly, like just looking back now, I'm like, oh, it's so great that they did certain things and they encourage us to like interact with certain books, movies. My mom would always show us movies about the South African apartheid, which as a kid, maybe you're kind of like, this is a lot, but like, um, it wasn't necessarily intense. Like, shout out to Serafina. If anyone knows that movie, it has Whoopi Goldberg in it. I would recommend you watching it. And yeah, they never really shied away from having certain conversations, like just growing up in the US too, having like friends from all different backgrounds. It's so interesting to hear them say sometimes like their parents are like, oh, we're not going to talk about that. Or, oh, we shouldn't talk about that. Like my parents were always forthcoming with like their opinions about certain things, but it wasn't in a domineering way of like, you need to think this way or do things this way outside of like our academics. Like they were definitely like,
yes, yeah,
good grades, but
yeah, that's a must.
More so, yeah, like on a social way. And so yeah, like even like I would go to France every summer. With my family, we spent our summers in France because that's where we had family. So to still stay connected to our family as well. And I remember even like the Roma in France, they're like all over, right? And like there's a certain stereotype that people will associate Roma with. And I remember I was like, I'm a super curious person. I was a super curious kid. And I would just ask my mom, and like she wouldn't shy away from conversations like that. She would more so say, like, this is what's going on. And also like know a little bit more about the history versus the stereotype. And so even things like that, like not shy to have those certain conversations, which I feel like encourages me, even as an adult, like that's how I very much am as well. Like I don't think I'm going to know everything about everyone or every situation, but something I can do is look into it and then form my own understanding of it and not rely on like stereotypes or what other people say. So yeah, that's kind of how I grew up.
No, I thank you for sharing that. And huge shout out to your mom and dad for laying down the foundation for you and your sister. You even think about the times that we're in today in particular, and had you not known all these sorts of things. And of course, I'm a parent, so I've also been a kid, so I know there's the side as a child of like, why are you telling me this? What's the point of this? But it really, that repetition, that kind sort of education helps us as we get older and understand. And I that wasn't always there for like my siblings and us. And I think my parents had a bit of a different different sort of view. And really for a lot of the immigrants out here was that just that survival mentality of like, you really are trying to be that model citizen. And they really adapted to like, you just let go and you do what you got to do to fit in. And so now when I go back and try to learn about history and stuff, even sometimes it's foggy for my parents and my grandparents who would be holding on to that aren't here. So sometimes we're learning together, my parents and I, which was a great way for me to then also go back and teach my kids as well too. I drive them crazy as well, because I think exactly what you said is we got to start with the facts, the history versus the stereotypes. And I'm unlearning a lot of that about my own community. I grew up with a lot of stereotypes. And that none of those were actually true. You know, I'm like 44 years old when I learned, oh, that's just people and assimilation and all of that gets put together for us to think that's the way it's supposed to be, or that's why brown people do what they do or whatnot. So I really admire how your parents in just a natural environment helped you and your sister understand that. And look at what you're doing today. Like they must be so proud when they see the work that you're doing today in teaching the rest of us.
Yeah, that it's actually, I don't think they know really what I do. Which is
Oh,
so funny.
well, it's the social media stuff that's maybe like, what? Yeah.
Yeah, maybe eventually, like they are very encouraging and like I'll tell them bits and pieces. You know, but it's so interesting. I think my mom more so, sometimes she worries for me because when I first did start social media, and I've just learned like a lot of like boundaries and like understanding parasocial relationships and things like that. But people, especially when they feel activated, like people would say really like racist things or like start like disagreements, arguments, like in my comment section or like my DMs and things like that. And I'm sure I could still experience that. But like, for example, like my Instagram, I limit comments and I limit my messages and things like that because it's just like not worth interacting that, not to create like a bubble around me, but more so at the end of the day too, it's only social media. So yeah, my mom sometimes she's like, don't talk about certain things. And I'm like, Mom, this literally, it's literally my business, basically.
Yeah, I kind of have to.
Yeah, I'm sure they're kind of like, well, even if you think about the history, and I wouldn't even call myself an activist, but if you think about the history of activism, like it's not an easy path. You could get harmed.
Yeah.
I think in this day and age with social media, maybe less so than the prior years. Well, actually it depends where you are, right? Like that's not true at all for a lot of folks. I think there is some sort of fear, and there's some ancestral fear too, because I definitely have had family members before me who have advocated and been activists, and it has not boded well for them. So there's a little bit of hesitation and fear. I think there's also maybe generationally people don't understand that people do want to change and they're now seeing social systems for what they are, and people aren't as afraid to have these conversations. So it is shifting a little bit.
Yeah, and I think kudos to you to keep doing what you're doing. And I appreciate what your mom's saying, because the one way where it is harmful is reference checks in the places we work, professional settings. They look us up on social media and they get a sense of who we are. So you are up against that as well in your place of work. If you're someone, and I just from knowing your content and talking to you a couple times, you're very clear in how you speak, and you say what you say, and you're not being mean, you're being factual, and you're calling out what is necessary, which is how you call, what you talk about with disruption. Like, let's call it for what it is. And what is this link to? Historical stuff. And you work in the education system and from my experience here in Canada, when we are part of those systems, they're very black and white, and you have to really fall under what it is that educational system is doing. And so sometimes I think for people who have a voice and want to do more, you feel trapped by your professionals, and you got to eat, you got to make money. But then at the same time, you're like, am I part of the problem? Because I can't really openly say what I want to, because work is now upset with me, or I'm going to get fired, or we've all been there when we go to work and you can tell everyone's talking about you or whatnot. And I don't know if that impacts you on the professional side when you're taking the time to help us understand what it means to be part of a community. Does it impact you at work?
Not necessarily. I keep both very separate. Like, I don't think maybe one of my coworkers actually follows me right now. Yeah, it's actually kind of separate because I am conscious of that.
Yeah.
But I think it is a little different too, being in education. So everything I did my master's in special education. And so I would say modern education programs today, credential and master programs, they teach all this stuff. My experience in education has propelled what I talk about. It's just that I was like, yes, kids need this, but adults need it too.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there was just like, it stopped at like, you're 18, and it shouldn't be the case. So in theory, schools and educational organizations should be like, yeah, we're all for it. In reality, it's not necessarily the case. I've never worried about like, ooh, if what I say my supervisor or principal or superintendent say they like interact with it, like, would that put me in jeopardy? Because it would kind of be a little bit hypocritical. Yeah. So I could advocate for myself. And I have. I've worked in a couple different districts. The district where I was the most vocal and bringing in like my business and stuff too, there was no issues. From what I know, there was, if anything, it gave me more credibility. Yeah. So in theory, it shouldn't be conflicting, because this is like what we say in educational spaces. We say kids need to have a safer, more inclusive environment, regardless of their background, because that just helps them learn.
Yeah.
Kids need to interface with Black educators. Research says that having more Black educators does support all children, again, regardless of their background. So there's a lot of things to back it up, which is why I think like my content resonates with a lot of folks too.
Yeah.
It's just that in actuality, does it always happen in every educational setting? No. Mm-hmm. But it would look pretty bad on them if they were like, your content is disruptive, unless it's like a private institution. Then they can do whatever they want. Then the public sector, no. Yeah.
It's like, we're not just talking the talk, we're walking the walk too. Because over here, we see a huge divide. Like, literally, those that voted for our conservative government are for what has just been passed in the province Alberta and in our schools. One, like health education. So, like sex ed, consent, teaching kids about health, all of that is opt-in now. So it's not just something that's taught to kids. You have to, as a parent, be alert, wait for the billion school forms that get sent, not miss out on that, sign it and say, yes, I want my kid to attend this class. And this is scary, because we're talking about teaching kids the basics of what it means to not go have sex, but do all the things that are around their health, around safety, consent, understanding about sexual violence, all of that. And then as well, any children that identify as non-binary, trans, their pronouns are outside of their birth pronouns, they now have to get permission from their parents before the school can follow those pronouns. And it's like, we're going backwards here, which is really sad, because I know for me growing up, school was like one of my few safe places. And for a lot of young people, that is the neutral, safe place. And so teachers are now going to look like unsafe people, whether the teacher wants to agree with this or not. The rule is, I got to call your mom and dad and make sure I can call you by this pronoun. And we're like in a weird place in this province because of our government that wants to go quite the opposite way, and we're very fear-based and these are just the beginnings of where we're headed as a community. And it's sad, because the biggest impact is going to be on our future, our kids, who can't can't grow up with safety. And any of us that have grown up in fear, we know what comes out of that. So I like hearing that you're in the part of the world and even in your education system where it's like, yeah, let's walk the walk if we're going to talk the talk. So that's good to hear.
But you make a good point. It really is like even the US, it's state by state.
Yeah.
I am in California, so it changes. I could imagine teaching in Florida.
Yeah.
I probably would always be in trouble.
Yeah.
And then also, not only is it state by state, it really here in the US is district by district. I've worked in a couple different districts, and each one of them is so different and of what they want to prioritize and the tools they have to support each kiddo. So that's also the thing too, is like, and I think folks kind of forget, right? Like sometimes when we have our own experiences, we're like, well, it must be like this everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And the reality is it's not.
Mm-hmm.
Things can be so different, even like an hour away. And so knowing that can actually bridge the gap sometimes of like, oh, this might be my experience because I'm in this community or this situation, but your experience might be different. How can we help each other? Like in California, we have teacher unions. They don't have teacher unions in every state. Like Texas does not have teacher unions. Even within California, like the district before my last district, their policies, especially around special education and protecting special education teachers, is so different than my last district. The last district I was at, it immaculate, like very strong procedures, supports for special education educators, and I gave them that contract so they can look it over, because I knew from being there the experience is so different. Mm-hmm. But you wouldn't know if we weren't even open to that conversation, right? So even understanding that we're all dealing with different things, and sometimes we don't realize that because we center our own experiences. Inevitably, sometimes you have to. But the bad thing isn't that we do have different experiences. I mean, that doesn't have to be a bad thing. It could be the thing that propels us to working together and helping each other out.
100%. Yeah. I think you hit the nail on the head. I think as we talk about community and all our roles, that's just it is, I mean, we're going to get into a little bit about it too, is like we show up expecting the community to fit us as individuals and understanding that, okay, we're all coming from different shapes, sizes, different lens, all that. And so what's the ultimatum? What's the end game here when we're part of a community versus, well, I need this to exactly fit me, because that's just not going to happen. And we're going to get into that a little bit, but maybe where we can sort of start is sort of like rethinking community. So for those that are part of this conversation today, we'll get Nike to drop her plug later, but I really encourage you guys to follow. I think she gives us so much information in a way that is bite-sized, digestible, and really challenges the scripts that we grew up with as children, the narratives that we've sort of are living by. And for me personally, like I said, the last 6 months has been an interesting experience. And so I've been going back now and thinking, had I had you, maybe a few months ago, maybe I would have tended to how I left the community that was part of in a different way. Maybe I wouldn't. I don't know, right? Hindsight's a bitch. But something I love about your post is that you're clear, you're so crisp. When you bite into that crispy apple, that is what you are. You are a crispy apple about who you will and who you will not build community with. And, one of the things that I've learned through you is you've said you won't build, and I'm sorry if I'm not saying this right, but this is all part of learning and you'll help me with this. You said you won't build people with who mammify. So it's mammify, right?
Yeah.
Black women and femme presenting folks. And so for those of us that are just understanding that and you'll correct me if I'm wrong or add to it, but this word comes from the stereotype of the mammy, where Black women were expected to be endlessly nurturing and self-sacrificing, especially within the context of white families and for them. And the reason I want to start here is because I think you know, we all have a story in how we got to where we are. We're all part of history. And I think we see a lot today, women of color, Black women, Indigenous women, the rest of us women of color, we get very interesting definitions put on us, and they come from someplace. So can you walk us through what it means in today's time to be mammified, and how people can check themselves so that we're not unconsciously, and I think that's what happens, intention isn't there, but for most of us, we are unconsciously expecting, in this case, Black women to carry this whole load of care within the community. And so can we talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I'm an eldest daughter too, so
yeah,
sometimes my mom, yeah, like the last conversation I had with my mom, actually, we were talking about how I was like, growing up, it was like the expectation that was I had to take care of my younger sister, which I think, yes, siblings should take care of each other. But I was like, I wish it was more so about you need to take care and look out for your younger sister, but your younger sister also has to look out for you. Because I was like, I felt a little like this like disconnection. And then as we grew up, it became kind of a point of contention where like we were now older and we would be with all the cousins, and the expectation was still that I had to tend to my younger sister, when it's like, well, now she's over 18, like she also needs to know how to come out for herself and learn how to build these relationships. Like I grew up, okay, I have to not only nurture the relationships between my cousins, between me, but also my sister, and like that's not going to build their relationship. So it's more so talking about that. Yeah, and I always say, like, I'm not the strong friend. I am not the friend that you should go to take care of all your issues. Like, of course, I will support you. I'll help you up. Like, very much that friend, but I'm not the strong friend. Like, check up on me, please.
I need it too. Yeah.
Yeah, and I just like, especially my first school district where I was a special educator, I just felt first of all, going from Atlanta, where there's like so many Black people, I think in Georgia it's 30% Black. Moving to California is about 5 to 6% people are Black. So just moving to an area where there's not a lot of Black people, I was just like, I don't know if they know how to interact with Black people. And within that, it seems like they're placing whatever perceived experience they should have with Black people onto me. And I just found myself in a lot of situations where I was like, oh, but you say it. Like, oh, we all have an issue with this, but you say it. You're just so good at saying things, which I am good at saying things, but also time and place. I could teach you how to say things too. Yeah. That's what I do in my business. So like, I could teach you how to say things too. Or she can handle it. I cannot handle it. Please don't put it on my plate. I cannot handle it. At least ask if I can handle it. Right? Like a lot of doing that. And so I guess it's extensively, it's more so my professional setting, like workplace, I've experienced that. I haven't really experienced that with like friendships and things. Thank goodness. Or maybe like younger friendships, like just when I didn't fully know what I wanted from friends. But yeah, I think we are used to, especially in the US, mammifying Black women, Black femmes, femme presenting folks, and expecting them to do the bulk of the work that we don't want to do. And thinking that also we might as well say it because there's already like all the other things stacked against us, right? Like the angry Black woman stereotype and being loud and being aggressive and all those things. It's kind of like, and I will say, like, I experience this usually from other people of color, not white folks. That I think is an important distinction too, of like, we might as well get her to say it because we're supposed to be seen as, you know, sweet, docile, like chill, and like the more aggressive things, she can say it. So yeah, I felt like we tend to do that to Black women, even if you think in like a social, like pop culture basis, right? Sometimes with like celebrities or content creators, influencers, whatever, like people calling them the auntie or like, you're my mom now, or like all these things. Like even parasocial, you can see of like why they did not consent to being and doing that. It's one thing if they branded themselves as that way, but they didn't. Why is it so quick to go there with Black femmes? And I've been thinking about this a lot more recently too, but it's so interesting the new wave of people, okay, especially in the US. I think in the 60s, maybe even 70s, 60s, 50s, 40s, 30s, a middle class family, a middle class white family would have in a traditional, nuclear family, the man would go to work, the woman would stay at home, but there would always be a woman of color, usually Black or brown, also helping and assisting the white woman at home. And it's also so interesting where people are like, women now are able to work. White women now are able and forced to work. Like Black and brown women have been working for centuries. Sometimes when we get into community spaces outside of even like the workplace, but a little bit in the workplace, I see that, right? Of like, because I'm the white woman and I have kids, you as the Black or brown woman needs to assist me.
Interesting.
Like,
Yeah.
we don't have villages anymore. I don't know if you ever had a village or you were just paying for the village historically in the US. And even outside of the US, it still happens even to this day, right? But like, especially in the context of the US, that's where sometimes I'm like, because even in the school setting, right? I'm a special educator. In my positions, in the past, it wasn't that I had my own classroom. I was more so would support my kiddos like throughout the day. Maybe I would go to their class. As soon as I would go into the class, it was like, oh, she's here for all of the kiddos, and that's just not my job. Yeah. Or call her like this child who is supposed to be in my class right now is running around. Let's call her to go get them, even though that's not my job. Like, it was so quick to do that. And I had someone who was in the same position as me. We're both the same position, pay grade, everything. They would never call on her. So it's even like maybe unconsciously those things. But yeah, that was a lot.
No, I love that. Thank you for breaking that down, because you see how we start with history and in times where you and I weren't even here, and you see how in real time, that is still happening, but it's hard for people to connect the dots. And honestly, like I think as a South Asian woman, I feel this resonates in a different, but definitely in a connected way. Like when our worth in community, I think it can also be tied to service, sacrifice, or invisible labor. And at the end of the day, like what I'm realizing is that unless we take the time, reflect, name these dynamics, we end up, ourselves, it could be you and I, if we're not aware of these things, recreating harm inside the very communities we're trying to build. So I'm really curious, like from your thoughts on how we as women of color, coming from different experiences, but the underlying similar sort of feelings and vibes, women of color, again, like from different communities, how can we hold this line so we're not only seen for what we can give, but like for the fullness of who we truly are.
Setting it. I think a lot of times people inherit boundaries too, where they're just like, that person said that this is their boundary, so I'm going to use that boundary. It's a great idea, but it doesn't really necessarily apply to them.
Yeah.
So it's hard to hold on to boundaries that you actually don't resonate with.
Definitely.
Yeah. And it's so interesting. This conversation that I had under a video of mine on TikTok, actually, I keep thinking about it because this one person, basically I made a video about advocating for yourself isn't a one-time thing, which is unfortunate, right? Like someone should hear or know the first time and say, okay, but the reality of the situation in the world that we live in, that's not necessarily the case. So they were just saying like, oh, I tend to just give in because I will say no, and then someone will just keep pestering me about it. So like, I'll just give in and I'll just do it because it's easier. And we had the conversation back and forth about it, but I was really, something I think about that I like really want to emphasize for people is that advocating for yourself, you're going to have to do it over and over and over and over and over again. And getting comfortable with doing that is really instrumental. Because yes, it's hard to say no. And even saying no the first time can be nerve wracking. And then being forced to do it again is just like another nerve wracking thing. And then over and over and over again. And then you can start to question, like, should I say no? Like they're so intentional and intense about it. But the thing is, people are also going to, on the other side, they're going to advocate for themselves as well.
Yeah.
And so really you need to, like, setting a boundary or advocating for yourself isn't a one-time thing.
Yeah.
It might be a several time thing, even to the same person. And then if it's just so continuous where it's just disrespectful, then you have to have that conversation, right? But like, unfortunately, a lot of people don't just hear that first no and say, okay, like they will try to motivate you or to convince you or things like that. And even like, if you think in a lighthearted way, I'm a homebody, right? So sometimes my friends are like, oh my goodness, like we should go out tonight. And I'm like, I don't feel like it. And then they're like, no, come on, let's do it. Like, you're going to have fun. And then I'll go and I'm like, oh, I actually had the best time. Like they just know that sometimes I have to get to that mind, right? Think about it that way. It's not always that's going to be malicious, but sometimes you really do have to hold your boundaries because folks just don't understand.
Yeah. And honestly, like this is different, but the thing as a mom, particularly to two boys, that comes up is consent. Like, you know, that's the first thing I think of is, imagine if this conversation was about having sex and or engaging in some kind of sex power, and you're like, I just give in, I just say okay. Like this conversation starts, if we want to break these sorts of things, starts all sorts of levels at a very young age. For my husband and I, it starts when my babies are trying to push the limit, or please can I have that toy, please can I have that thing, I really want that, really want that, really want that, why, you know, not accepting, no, why can't I go to my friends, or I want my electronics, and helping them understand at an early age, like boundaries, and no means no, and when is it okay to negotiate, because if you got the skill, sometimes there are some things you need to negotiate, and when is a boundary, and being very clear about that. Because I think, again, we grow up in our brain as children gets wired in the way it does, and the environment and the lessons we learn, and those things stick with us as we get older, and then we get ourselves in sticky situations. Either we're saying yes to things we don't want to and shouldn't have to, or we're demanding that yes over and over because we're used to getting it. And I think power and privilege play such a big part in this, and it's something for all of us to recognize. I have power when I'm parenting. You know, I have privilege in ways that women like me in India don't. I get that. And I'm sure you have your versions of that too. And so we all have some kind of level of that. And I think we have to recognize, okay, in this situation, like who has the power, who has the privilege, how are we doing this?
No, definitely on my side too. I'm like, sometimes you want to encourage a friend to do something, and then I always say, honestly though, like, if you don't want to, I won't be mad. I'm just like asking you to consider this, right? But not everyone's going to be that conscious. Hopefully, as we learn, like, people do understand too. If someone says no, it's a no. But it's so unfortunate that interfacing with certain people, you just won't have that experience, right? So like, knowing your boundary too could kind of help in those moments where you kind of freeze up, right? Of like,
100%.
Wait, I said no and they are pushing, like, okay, like what do I do now? That also sometimes is the case too. And it's just really unfortunate. So like, folks have to learn to do that. And what I see happen in some contexts too, like more so like when my clients are setting boundaries with their communities, is like when they practice that, people take note and they can also practice that as well, right? Like, something, again, from my experience in teaching, is like, I would say no to certain things because I'm like, it's not, like, I could say yes, but honestly, I couldn't do it. It was a no. And I had a coworker who would be a little resentful with me because she was like, well, I always said yes to that before. and you're allowed to say no. And I'm like, did you even try to say no? And she's like, well, no, because I want to be on good terms with the person asking me. But then when she saw I said no and I was still on good terms, it got a little resentful because it's like I didn't even know I was allowed to say no. And when
Yes.
someone tells me like I didn't even know I was allowed to say no, it breaks my heart. Like some people sometimes don't even think they have the option of saying
100%. Yeah.
no or
Yeah.
setting the boundary.
Yeah, when you grow up with fear-based parenting and authority is a whole different thing, and you don't get choice, you grow up in a certain culture, and that doesn't go away. Like I literally feel like that's me when I was working. I had a coworker that I looked up to so much because she was so respected and she was fierce and she would speak up no matter what. And I'm like, I know I have that in me because that's how my family sees me. But at the same
Mhm.
time, I saw supervisors as authority in the same way I would respect elders. So I would always just same thing, like not know how to say no or ask. That was my big thing. And I think when you talk about this coworker, it's like getting to know our inner child. It shows up at work, in relationships and parenting, why we do the things we do. There's a story link to it and how we've come to make sense of that, I think. So it's interesting and good for her though to be like to even talk to you about that, because that could just also carry out in a way of like, well, why are you so special and I'm not? But wait a minute, I'm also making this choice. Even though I feel like it's not a choice, I'm choosing to not say no or whatever it is.
Yeah. And I think alongside that too, right? Some people think you're just born with it, right? Like,
Yeah.
oh, it's because it's easy for them to say no, or it's easy
Yeah.
for them to advocate for themselves or whatever. I'll tell you right now, I wasn't born with it. Probably was a people pleaser when I was a kid.
Yeah. You're the first,
Um,
the eldest daughter, 100%. You were
yeah,
a people pleaser.
yeah. That's definitely something I had to develop. It's a skill that you develop.
Yes.
And I kind of have had that experience too of like people just like, oh, it's easy for you. Like, that's why, like, you should do it. And it's like, no, it's not easy for me, actually. I overthink everything I say, but I'm to the point of my life where if I don't say it, it will eat me up.
Yeah.
That's where I got, right? Of like, I could say quiet at this time and not advocate for this and not point this out, but I'm betraying a part of myself. And that also doesn't feel good. You're going to feel bad either way. You're either going to overthink your no and like think, oh, they're going to hate me, whatever, or you're not going to like yourself. And there was just a certain point of my overall healing journey where I'm like, I'm no longer betraying myself. And that's something you have to
Yeah.
take on, right? It's
Yeah.
not that some people it's easier for them, so like that's why they do it. A lot of times that's not the case. It's a
Totally.
choice.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like those are strong values. And when things like that are eating us up, we feel we're betraying ourselves or others. It's the values that we're not living up to that we have within us. And I think we always let ourselves down first. And I think that's a good point of like, yeah, I'm not betraying myself. I think this is a good place to talk about your podcast, Catalyst. So
Oh yeah.
I love that you say this. You call it a space for people's disruptor era. I just think like you need t-shirts that say that, please. I'm in my disruptor era. My sister would be all over this. So what does it mean to you as we're talking? I feel like this word is coming up quite a bit, to be a disruptor. And I'm not just talking about in the systems, because I think sometimes that's a little more doable when it's not a personal thing. I'm talking about in our personal
Oh,
life, how
yeah.
to be a disruptor.
Yeah, I honestly came up with like disruptor era because also I think we all disrupt in so many different ways. In 2023, I sought out to have conversations. I think I interviewed like 150 people online. And the thing that kept coming up was like, I want to have these conversations, but I'm scared, or I'm just afraid of saying the wrong thing, or like all these things, right? Which I get. I'm an anxiety girly, I get it. But I was just like, it's so unfortunate because we think that there's one way to disrupt because there's one way on social media that's praised when it comes to disrupting. And I just think it's not realistic for all of us because we all have different capacities. We all have different gifts, wisdoms. We all have different ways that we like to communicate. I don't think one form of disruption is more valuable than another. Sometimes one form is more visible. That's fine. But I think there's valuable ways that we can all disrupt in our own lives. And within that too is I find myself sometimes encountering people's assumptions about me. And it's hard to I just feel like it's hard to have assumptions about me because, like my friend was telling me, like my lore is so deep. You could say, like, oh, yeah, you grew up in Atlanta. And I'm like, okay, yes, but also my parents are West African. And then people are like, oh, but your parents are West African. And then I'm like, oh, yeah, but like my mom's side is Afro-Brazilian. And like, like there's other like layers, like all through my life, right? Even with work, right? Oh, you're in education. I'm like, yes, but also I have a small business and then I have a podcast. So it's just like, I found people making assumptions about me and the work I did, right? So all you do is make posts on Instagram. And I'm like, well, literally,
That's awesome.
I actually spend a lot of my days advocating for kids with disabilities, especially Black and brown kids. And you don't know, but today I had a meeting with the superintendent and I had to outline all this and I was preparing all night for it, right? So it's just like, we all disrupt in different ways. You won't fully know how I disrupt because I'm not going to pour it all out on the internet for everyone to see. And we need those disruptions, right? Yes, we need people online disrupting. Yes, we need people protesting. We need folks boycotting. We need reporters. We need journalists. But also, you never know. There might be someone who is advocating for folks at their workplace and they work for a coffee shop. You don't know what they're doing, right? And we do need those disruptions. There's so many micro systems in place that we forget about because we're not a part of them. I don't know what goes on in the healthcare system, right? But I interviewed someone for my podcast a year ago who was breaking it all down for me. She was like, this is what nurses have to deal with. These are things that we have to get done before even like discharging a patient, and they don't even realize, like, I'm running after the doctor to make sure I have this. I'm making sure they have all their medications, all these things. And then sometimes at the end of it, I get yelled at by the patient because they want to leave. And then like I'm still battling getting paid because now I'm over hours. And did you know that there's actually a nursing shortage and there's not enough nurses? Like things like that, I would never know because I'm not in that industry. And I also think I would be doing a disservice to other people by criticizing them because I'm assuming I know exactly what they do and how they do it. And so it's more so we could all disrupt in our own ways. Maybe you're disrupting a conversation that you're having with your family because the thought that they have is like based on a stereotype or based on an ism. And like that is your disruption for the day. And then maybe you're going on to a protest on Saturday. I think the way we kind of dictate people to show up does a huge disservice because then people become fearful of showing up because they think they just won't show up perfectly. And I think people don't realize that fear of not showing up perfectly, people rather not do it at all.
Yes.
And I rather people try, even if it's not going to show up perfectly, because I think we're going to get farther. It's hard to disrupt anything if you're not going to try at all.
100%. Oh, I love what you just said. I think it's like exhale, like so for so many of us right now, because you and I talked about this too, what you get on your algorithm versus what I get on my algorithm. So you might have so much context about something that's happening in part of the world, and I have no context about it, and quote unquote I'm still shopping at Target, or I'm still doing what I'm doing, going to Starbucks or whatnot, and then now we meet up and I'm holding a Starbucks cup and you're like, what the fuck are you supporting Starbucks for? Don't you know what their role with Palestine is? And I'm like, what? I have no clue. Like, can I at least drink this $30 coffee because I barely afford it? Like, and now we're not going to be friends. And I think that happens in so many of our worlds. I'm guilty for being on both ends of that too, of like, okay, I don't know if we can be friends because you didn't show up for me in this way, in this conversation, you abandoned me. Or, I've been told you're not a good enough friend because you didn't show up this way. And so now we're just arguing and becoming part of the problem versus what you just said. Like, we all have our magic and how we can contribute, and one person does it better than like, I will never be Tony Neighbors, and I love him, I look up to him on social media. I will never be Syra Rao, co-founder of Deconstructing Karen, and there's all these different influencers and activists that you talk about, and even you, like, I look up to the work you do, and it's like I can sit here and say, oh, fuck, I'll never be as good in building community. And now I feel really guilty about how I've let people go or what. Or I can buck up and learn what you're suggesting and then try to interpret, and how does that make sense for me in my world? Because we live different worlds, unfortunately, while we're all under the same stars too. So the way you put that, I think, is a message that we all need to keep reminding ourselves. So thank you for sharing how we all have a disruptor in us and figuring out how that can come about. And like, that's the be all end all, I think, for many of us.
Yeah. And I find that the worry is where they're just not doing anything because they don't care. Some people, that is the experience, right? They just don't care to do the work. But I don't want to spend my time policing other people.
Yeah.
And I find that my gut is pretty on track, right? Like,
Yes.
I can know if someone is just like BSing, and I can know if someone is about the work. I just think sometimes it's hard. Like, I've had clients who they're actually are doing more than people realize, but people will come for them at like their lowest.
Yeah.
And say like, you're not doing enough. And they're like, oh my goodness, well, mentally, I'm actually not doing well. And so it just like piles up. And I just think sometimes, yes, we need to hold people accountable. We also should be giving grace to folks. And I find that the folks we feel more comfortable criticizing, it's because the positionality that they have. Like, most people are more comfortable criticizing Black women versus like a white male.
Yeah, I was just gonna say white man, like, literally.
Yeah, like that's a bias that sometimes we hold. So even knowing that for yourself of like, well, why do you expect a Black woman to do so much? Or I hate when people say that. Coming from Atlanta, the only really people you would hear say the N-word, like, socially, are Black people. If you're not Black and you're saying it, it's problems. In California, it's kind of different. And I had a friend who is not Black, but a person of color, who told me once, they were like, oh, just so you know, like, I used to say that in high school, but I just didn't know any better. And like, all my Black friends let me. So like, I thought it was okay. I don't say anymore, but all my Black friends let me. And I just didn't know any better. And I told them, I was like, why'd you put the onus on your Black friends for knowing better? Because you're both the same age. So you use them saying it's okay as a way to measure, oh, because I didn't know any better, and also they should have known better. It's still there's no accountability on your end, right? Like, why do we put, like, I didn't come out the womb knowing about social systems and how to be anti-racist. Like, that's not something I'm inherently born with. And sometimes we have that assumption when it comes to Black and people of color.
Yeah.
And why is that? Like, it's a choice. You have to choose. Now, did my parents guide me and support me and with the things around me? Did it help me come to this point? Yes. But it could easily not be that case as well. And so, yeah, I find it interesting sometimes of like, well, if you were 13 and your Black friend was 13 and your Black friend is probably saying you could say it out of like wanting to assimilate and be cool, why should they know better than you?
Oh man,
you're both the same age. So
you have a video where you talk about, well, I didn't know better, or I didn't know.
That wasn't my experience.
Yeah, that was in my experience. Yes. And I've been on both sides of that. I've been the brown friend that has only been growing up in white spaces, assimilated hard, wanted to be white, like more than anything, and gave permission to so many white people in my community to be able to use me as a reference point of, oh, well, my brown friend says it's okay, or my brown friend says, you know, brown people don't do this or don't do this or whatnot. And I've also been on the other end where I myself have said to brown people, oh, that's not my experience with that person, and discrediting them when I know what that's like to be discredited. And I think a lot about my role in that. And okay, fine, yes, a lot of it comes from assimilation, blah, blah. But at some point, I also have to take responsibility for myself and figure out where am I going now, knowing this information. And I think the key in all of that is like, you said it best, is a self-compassion in this like labor of grace that we those that are sort of like seeing something that we can't unsee now. It's hard. You know, I used to say, oh, I'm late to this party, and I'm beating myself and I've been told, don't say that. Like, you showed up now, you're at the party now. So like, make it the most and learn and learn and learn, instead of like, why did I say that? Why I didn't say that? But sometimes us people of color, the way, you know, that whole civic sense, we've on the surface, the way we've been taught to be polite, follow the rules, we start to give so much power to like this whole white supremacy when we speak so ill of our own people, and when we, you know, put ourselves down. And I think, I don't know, what's the thing to do? Like, do you have advice or feedback or seen something that's been helpful in trying to build awareness around that for those of us that are of color and we do that?
I mean, I feel like it's such a personal journey, but for example, like, I don't have conversations about Black people to non-Black people. I remember someone reached out to me 2 years ago. She was trying to get me canceled after this, but she like sent me a DM. She was like, this Black woman says that she is intimate with us white supremacists. Like, we need to talk about this. I remember getting that DM. It was like the holiday season too. Like, I'm just at home with my family, and I'm like, that happens. Yep. Sometimes some people feel like, even if it's someone who doesn't care about them, their well-being, is racist, they will be in relationship with them, sleep with them, whatever the case may be. And then she was like, you don't seem like riled up about this. Like, this is something important conversation. Like, I'm asking to have a conversation with you. And I was just like, I feel like I'm not showing up the way that you think I should show up. Mm-hmm. But also, I don't know if I said this to them or I was thinking in my head, but I'm always like, why would I, a Black woman, have a conversation with you, a white woman, private or not, about another Black woman who also I have no idea about, right? Like, I'm not the one in a relationship with a white supremacist. I couldn't tell you exactly what she's thinking, what she's going through, how she got to that point. If you want to have that conversation, reach out to her. I don't know. But also, like, I don't want your white validation in having this conversation, or for you to want my Black validation in criticizing this other Black woman. Like, it just doesn't make sense. And I have encountered things like that. And at first I used to do it until I realized what was happening, right? And now I'm like, I'm not doing that. That's just, if you really think about it, it makes no sense. It's one thing if I'm having it with like my Black friends. Like, what's going on? Like, maybe she's like assimilating, like whatever, but it's another to have it. I don't care how woke you are as a white person, or like, you're like, I am so in her. It just doesn't make sense to me.
But then the thing about that too, because you're right. And I agree with you. I learned this like way late in life about my job is to not talk about my people with anyone outside of my people. Like I see that now so much in the last few years in particular, and it's helping me build a community, a responsibility, or B, responsibility, but also getting a lot of validation. And one brown person's experience is not the same, as you said, as another brown. You know, whether you're Black, brown, Asian, the color that we are, we all have these different contexts. But I think what we see a lot of, and I get this policing too, is, and it's literally from white people, and it's like, well, you were racist too, or that Black person said that, so I can say it, or the brown person said it, so I can. And it's like, those are dangerous people, I'm learning, to me, because it's you have so much to focus on for yourself, as I do. If I'm sitting here and only focusing on, you know, these white spaces that I have left in the last 6 months, but only focusing on those people, that's also my problem, because in that, I also have so much work to do, some that I don't even know yet. I'm just discovering, and I'm okay with that. I'm getting there and I'm figuring it out. But when we sit here and we come from this position of, I know better, and, you know, what about that person? I think that's super red flag danger zone. And we have to focus on, or look at that. Like, you could have thought of 6 things. That woman could have messaged you and told you 6 things that she could be working on herself. But we have to target this Black woman that's in this, okay, whatever that is, her people hopefully are going to help her in her community. And it ends up being this white savior thing of, I'm going to talk at you, not with you. I'm going to create a space to say it for you than to uplift your voice. And I'm guilty of this too. I've been on both ends in my own community about this too, and I'm trying to learn from that. But I think there's I don't know, maybe you have something to add to that, but I just feel like that always gets me. That always gets me.
Yeah, I find that folks want to be at the finish line so bad, and for my own wellness, I'm like, there is no finish line. There's always going to be something I don't know. There's always going to be something that I said in the past that now is wrong. There's always going to be something that I could do better at. It's the reality of the situation. I know that for myself, and I surround myself with people who also know that, and they have that grace for themselves. And yeah, I find that a lot of people are so quick to point the fingers to other people when we have so much that we have to navigate on our own. And then also, people aren't always realistic about their positionality. If you're saying, oh, that Black person said something racist, I'm upset as a white person. Number one, Black people can't be racist. They could be prejudiced, right? They can't be racist because you have to have that system of power. Maybe if you go to a country where there's only Black people, sure. But even then, I've been to many countries where there's only Black people and the white people still have positional power. So even learning that, right? Like, but they could be prejudiced. Own it, right? Like, take it. But racism is really only really reserved for white people. Brown people can be prejudiced to everyone. Everyone can be anti-Black. Everyone can be xenophobic. It's just the reality. I think it also plays into, again, what I was saying of like, why should a Black person know better than you as a white person or as a non-Black person, right? Why is that expectation? Well, because they're Black, they should be the epitome of anti-racist, know all the isms, know all the social systems. We've all been socialized to participate in these systems. Now, historically and realistically, are Black people more likely to understand certain things? Yeah, because of the position that we've been in. But to always put that expectation of like, you should know better just because you're Black also doesn't sit well with me, because it's like, I've been socialized just as much as you. Like, I was socialized to obey the patriarchy. That's something I still have to navigate. We've all been socialized to obey the patriarchy. Again, I do not come out of the womb saying anti-patriarchy, and I know exactly how to speak about it and what to say and all the things and all the history. Again, it's like a choice. And so also that expectation of like, you should know better because the color of your skin. The reality is that's not going to be the case for every single person. There's also a privilege of being able to have these conversations, being able to have an education that isn't produced by a certain narrative, being able to have access to books, like all those things take a part in it too.
Yeah. Yeah. And I agree with everything you're saying. And something in this last few months, free space I've had, because I have no friends now. So I'm like trying to figure out what that means, how to make friends and all that. One thing that I'm learning is about impact. And I'm trying to figure out my role in this too, because what I've seen in the white spaces that I've been in is that it's out of sight, out of mind. So the impact of what happens for me as a brown woman or people of color, our indigenous communities here, the impact is there. If you can see it, you're in the room with someone sharing the story, you're with them. But as soon as they're not there and you go on to do your white people work every day and, you get through the day, it's hard for many white people, not all, but most of them, to be able to carry that impact throughout the day with them. And that's made me really angry in the last little while. And so what I've been trying to do is say, okay, what that happens for you too, though. Like I do that as well. If the impact is not in the room with me, and I know there's certain injustices, there's certain, like I have a lot of privilege here in Canada. I know that I'm pro-Palestine, but at the end of the day, it's easy for me to forget about things. It's easy for me to go into my everyday life. And so I have to remind myself, okay, like the impact shouldn't be me having to be on social media watching sad videos for it to hit me. Like I have to understand how this shows up every day so that I can carry it with me while I don't lose myself, but also I'm aware. And there are other, the indigenous communities, these stolen lands that we live on. So what's the impact to the indigenous community, and like what's my role versus just reading a truth and reconciliation land acknowledgement? We all say it, but then like we go right back into whatever it is. So how do I make that part of my life every day and learn and learn and learn? And so I think sometimes we forget, and this goes back to what you were saying about being a disruptor too, like we all have things we can be learning, and instead of pointing the finger at others, it's like turn it back inward and look at ourselves. And okay, so like you say, it's not what is the community doing for me to trust it, but what am I doing so I can be trusted by the community? And that goes to say in the best kind of relationships too. If I'm your partner, you shouldn't have to just think about what you can do for me. I have to also think about what I can do for you. So how do we balance it, but also understand like we have our own work to be doing as well here? And again, I can point my finger at you and everyone else, but what do I got to do to bring it back to me? And like, what's my role in this? And what can I be doing?
It's something I think about. I guess you just have to get comfortable with yourself and saying like, I know there's a lot for me to learn. And I also know there's a lot I'm good at. And how can I show up in relationships and communities knowing that too? It's such a personal thing. And the better I get at friendships, the better I get at community. The better I get at relationships, the better I get at community. The better I get at community, the better I get at friendships and relationships. And so it really is hand in hand. And just like knowing like, okay, if I keep encountering the same thing, what is my role in it?
Yeah, there's patterns there, right?
Yeah. And I really find it's very rare that you're in a conflict or situation and only one person is completely right? 100%. Like usually maybe one person did more than the other person, but usually you can look at a situation or a conflict and say, okay, this happened and I could have done this a little better.
Yeah.
Or
yeah,
we could have had more communication around this. Sometimes that does happen where one person is completely right. And I would love it to be every time for me, but I just know realistically it's not. But I think sometimes we have to lean into that understanding when it comes to relationships and communities and be like, okay, I know that it should be a two-way street. So I know that there's something I am contributing to this, whether it's good or bad, whatever the case may be.
So when we think of a thriving community, what's your sense of a thrive? Like, how would you describe a thriving community?
It's so dependent on what the goal of the community is. But basically, I would say it's one where the shared goal is understood and everyone feels like they can contribute and participate when it comes to that shared goal. From like the workplace, where it's like, okay, our goal is to work in this industry and make enough money to take care of ourselves. This is a workplace goal. We're here to do our jobs and take care of ourselves, to like the shared goal of like a book club, like we're here to read books and have conversations, right? Like everyone has to be okay with the shared goal. And sometimes in community spaces, usually more leisure community spaces, it's like people aren't even on the same page about what the goal of the space is. Some people are like, oh wait, I thought this book club was for us to read books and have discussions, and other people are, I thought this book club was for us to get together and talk about anything. Already there, you're going to have like two different things going on, miscommunication, whatever the case may be. So being really clear about the shared goal, making sure everyone's able to participate and contribute, also with like accessibility, right? And then also having clear community agreements or norms or guidelines, again, that people are aware of, that they know what the expectation of the space is, so they can choose and consent to participate or choose not to participate in. And having a lot of clarity. I really believe that clarity is care. I find that we have been socialized to participate in mind games, whether it comes to our dating, relationships, friendships, and now our community spaces of like, I'm going to see how they show up and I'm going to see if I like that. I'm going to respond and then I want them to respond. I want them to read my mind, so I'm going to say this and see if they take the bait. Like, just be clear. Be clear, direct, and say, this is what I need.
Yeah, you do a lovely job talking about that in throughout all your threads, just about clarity takes away any assumptions. So we're clear right off the bat. And, you know, when you talk about the thriving community, it reminds me of when I used to work in leadership and we would have teams. And a lot of the time, the conversation was about, okay, what's the goal of this team? But it's not me, it's we, where this team isn't made up of one person. And you know, people come and go in community, just like on a team at work. You're not going to be here forever. This team was here before you. Hopefully it's here after you. So how are we contributing to it without personalizing it? It's not to make adjustments to make it better for me as an individual. So I don't work night shifts. So can we take that off the schedule? But it's no, this is put in place because it makes the system run smoother. We need to think about the greater thing here, not us as individuals. And when you were describing that, it brought me back to that. And I was like, oh yeah, like I remember that when we used to think about how to have a thriving team where people are respected, but it's not a personal thing, and it's not about you and me. It's about at that time, it was working with young, vulnerable population. So it's about the young people. And I think it takes away from that personal piece of exactly what you said of, well, you know, if you think of our WhatsApp groups, it's exactly that. Who's watching, who's not, who's responding, who's not, who's the consistent one that shows up. And some people feel like they're, you know, taken on more than others, and we burn out, right? That's how we burn out, and that's how communities crumble. And the key is to be part of something that can continue and grow and help us grow and challenge us back. So, and I think you do such a wonderful job. I can't say enough when you share like all your posts, everything. I'm like, is she reading my mind? Like, is she like, are there cameras up here? Like, why is she putting this out there? But I think really the message is like, I'm not the only one. Many of us are trying to figure this sense of belonging, of not just belonging somewhere, but also giving back so others can belong as well. And I really appreciate how you encourage us to think about that.
And knowing for yourself too, right? Like, I find that sometimes we want to make a community work and it's just not going to work. Like if I'm like, oh, I want to be a part of a group and it's like a debate team and I'm like, well, I actually hate debate, but I choose to be a part of that club. And then I'm hating it every single time. And then I'm fighting with the goal. And I'm like, I know this is debate club, but maybe we should do tennis club instead. And they're like, no, this is supposed to be debate club. Like we can't accommodate to you in this case. We can give you tools to know how to better debate. We can help support you to know how to better debate. But if you want to change the whole group, the whole dynamic, the whole goal of the group to tennis club, this isn't going to work. And then I get mad at them for not doing that. That's not really helpful to me.
Yes.
And I now have a bad experience at being in a community space. And also I don't have any community friends anymore. So
also that, right?
It's knowing for yourself too. At the same time though, at the debate club, if I'm like, hey, I want to be a part of this debate club, but I'm unable to read the notes, can we make sure that they're accessible and they're text to speech? And they're like, no. Then that's where there's a problem, and they could do accommodations, right? So it's knowing the difference. And I find sometimes people don't necessarily always consider the difference. But again, that's where the clarity really helps. And
yeah. Well, and it's like you said, it's not the me, it's the we. And like when we look at it from the lens of like, this is going to benefit me, and how can we tweak this and do this to benefit me, then I think that's where that whole problem kind of continues too, is we have to look at it from a high level as well, not just from this little micro place that I'm sitting in too. So I just want to say I could talk to you. I have like so many more questions. So this just means I'm going to beg you to come back again. But a couple of things that I feel I'm taking away today is what I just learned from you is community is not about me. It's about we. It's not designed to meet every need of mine, but it will absolutely, it's meant there to challenge us and help grow us. And care is not always convenient. You say this so well. And your second part to that is that care is necessary, though. It's there, but it's, again, not maybe meant to, for me, like my mom would care for me, but the overall care and respect for this community that we're building, it's there. We all have to be part of it. So I loved how you talked about disruption. It's part of our story. We all have a way to contribute and challenge things. So that's going to be something that sits with me for sure, that I have to go back and write in my diary about. And maybe before we get into the middle fingers up part, you can share with us where people can start following you, where they can find your podcast.
Yeah, so you can follow me at Nike Aurea. It's NikeAurea on Instagram. I'm on TikTok, but I don't really talk about this stuff on TikTok. It's just like once in a blue moon. And my website is also the same. It's just NikeAurea.com. If you're ever interested in working with me, if you go through my website, I'll see it first versus going through my DMs. And my podcast is called Catalyst Podcast. The intention is all about breaking down these important topics to make it chunkable so that people can not feel overwhelmed when it comes to doing this type of work, because it can be very overwhelming. As someone who's neurodivergent myself, I just know that overwhelming feeling can kind of stop us from doing it. So I'd rather we just try little by little than not do it at all. So you can check out my podcast too. It's in the middle of a season. So have some new episodes out.
Okay, so here we ask our guests what they want to put the middle fingers up to. Could be lighthearted, could be a little bit more on the deeper end, really up to you. So what do you want to put your middle fingers up to today?
Honestly, diaspora wars.
Okay, yeah.
And I think like the Black community has the biggest diaspora wars, but I'm sure other communities do too because of colonialism now.
Yeah.
Everyone's spread apart, but I don't believe in them. I know they happen, but I don't believe in them. I don't contribute to them, because when you get into the real space with your real people, those conversations just kind of go to the wayside. And with the history that we have of the world, everything is so nuanced. And I think a lot of us are just hurt and disconnected ancestrally, and our ancestors are pissed at us.
Yeah. They're rumbling for sure. That's not thunder we hear. That's them saying, come on, people, don't do it the same way. And maybe you can explain what you mean when you talk about the wars, because I think this could be a new term for many people. So what are we talking about here?
Yeah. So diaspora wars are basically, like, for example, Black people, right, are all over the world. You have Black people who were pillaged from Africa and they were brought to the US or Latin America or to the Caribbeans or even to Europe. And then you have Black people who are still in Africa. And sometimes, because we're all different descendants and each group has created their own culture, there's just some like tiffs in between of like, well, Africans are mean to people in the Caribbeans and people in the Caribbeans are mean to Black Americans, and we're all beefing with each other, and like you were enslaved and you weren't enslaved, and all these stereotypes that were manufactured by white supremacy culture. And at the end of the day, we were all harmed under these systems. And also, realistically, unless you really know your full out history, you don't know who was enslaved, technically. Like, I am first generation Black American. My parents are West African, but like I mentioned earlier, my mom's side was actually enslaved in Latin America. And that has happened to a lot of people, and we don't necessarily realize it. So sometimes it feels a little silly of, oh, I know this for sure about your ancestry, when we actually have no idea.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I thank you for sharing that. I think for those of us that come from different communities of color, I think we have, again, it's like a connection there. We have newcomers, we have people that were model minorities that immigrated way back in the day. We have people, we have the colorism issue to deal with. We have caste systems. We have what part of the river are you from? We have all these sorts of things that do the similar thing for us, where it breaks us up. And we are a global majority. If we actually put our heads together, we're so much stronger together, but we keep falling into the trap of white supremacy and allowing it to divide us. And I was at a summer barbecue, and it was a bunch of different brown women. And for the first time, I'm born and raised here. And there's always been a stereotype. If you're born and raised here as a brown person, you look down on immigrants, and you don't all, but many don't speak so well of them. It's like, we're better because we were born here. And I got to experience the other side of it, where I was, there was a bunch of immigrant women, and a couple of them were like, oh, you can't even read and speak the language. Oh, so that means you were born here. And instead of getting offended, in my head, I was like, damn, this is amazing. We've come so far, because good for our immigrant population to have a little bit of oomph in them, and, put me in my place as well, because I'm sure people like me haven't treated immigrants as well as we could have too. And so I'm just getting a part of something bigger. But it was a reminder, like, we could have all connected and been in this wonderful space. And for the most part, we were. But there was no need to divide ourselves in that. And it shows up in these tiny little WhatsApp groups, tiny little spaces. So we hear Nike talking about the Black community. And I think the Black community isn't the only community that is struggling with this. I think many of us that are of color have our work as well to do. So I'm glad you brought that up. And that's good to bring to light and encourage us to look at that.
Yeah. Don't beef with me. I don't believe in it.
Yeah, I love it. You have so many good shirt ideas. Don't beef with me. I don't believe it. So is there anything you wish we asked or we talked about community that maybe we didn't, that you want to bring up before we call it a day?
I think just a reminder, I think we all deserve safe spaces, community spaces. And if you've been burned in a community space, most of us have too. And just know that you will find the space for you. Every community space that we leave and transition out, it just teaches us more about like what we want and who we want to be surrounded by. And we all deserve that. So you'll find it.
I appreciate that. And for everybody that joined us today, these conversations are door openers. We're just scratching the surface. We're just starting to talk about these things. So if you have any thoughts or any experiences that you want to add and build upon this conversation, you know where to find me. You now know where to find Nike, so you know where you can reach out to her. Please follow her. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your time with me. I really appreciate it. I hope you leave here knowing how much I am learning from the work that you're putting out there. And it's definitely resonating like 1000%. So thank you for that.
So great to hear. Thank you so much.